All right, this is part two in our series on interviewing different coaches and trainers from nearby gyms. We have Shane Sweatt on today. He runs the Sweatt Shop. He's out of Cincinnati. This is the guy that was on CrossFit's staff as a subject matter expert, bringing the whole world of Conjugate to CrossFitters. Some CrossFitters out of his gym were a one-time Sam Dancer. He had Sam Briggs. He sent many teams to the games. He's worked and competed in powerlifting, cycling, endurance races, works with a lot of fighters, MMA fighters, track athletes. So I went to his seminar. Actually, we hosted his seminar at Unbreakable, and he came in and he introduced the Conjugate system to me first and then expanded a lot of the things that I was learning and really took us to some great things and learned plenty from him. So part two in our lifting nerd series that I'm really fortunate to have on the show. Hope you enjoy it. All right, welcome back to Athlete Builder. I'm your host, Jim Beebe. I got my teammate here, Lucas Lorian, and today from the Sweatt Shop, we have Shane Sweatt. Really excited about this one, Shane. So I know I talk really quickly. I have a lot of questions. I'm just trying to get as much knowledge out of you as I can, which is usually the case whenever we're together. So really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate having you here.
No problem. I'm looking forward to it. I don't mind questions, so we're good.
So just a quick summary for those that know Shane. He's been coaching 20 years. He's great with the barbell and teaching things with the barbell, but also great with things outside the barbell. So I want to make sure I get all this right. So 20 years you've trained and coached along with people. You were over at Westside. You've had your own gym, CrossFit Conjugate. You are subject matter expert for CrossFit staff doing seminars. You've done your own seminars. You've done your seminars with Louie. You coached amateurs, mom and pops, but also plenty of pro athletes too. Is that right? So far, so good?
Yeah. I'd say, 80% of my clients are actually people who, like, as far as in my gym, just want to be healthy and want to fix some issues they have. As far as it goes, athletes go, I've had now 134 all-time world records broken out of my gym. It covers all 10 weight classes. It covers every single lift, squat, bench, and deadlift. That is squat, bench, and deadlift raw and squat, bench, and deadlift equipped. That's sumo deadlift, conventional deadlift, any kind of, variation of that. I don't include age groups. I've had a lot of masters world records, a lot of teens or juniors world records, but I follow like the standard of Westside. We just talk about the all time. I've had athletes who had 6 X Games gold medals, Winter Olympics medalists, Summer Olympics medalists. Worked a lot of different people in different special operations communities for different types of jobs with that. Ultra endurance athletes. I've had athletes I've worked with that won the CrossFit Games, male, female. I've had teams podium at the games. So, my background's pretty diverse when it comes to a lot of different types of sports.
So if I said you worked with pro weightlifters, powerlifters, strongmen, MMA guys, volleyball, track, football, CrossFit, boxing, baseball. Any other major sports I'm missing? Because that's a pretty wide range.
Probably. It's right? Well, I've been in this for like over 20 years. I've slope style. Had a guy that I worked with that won X Games for slope style skiing. There's just a lot of different types of sports. But the thing is, the body only works so many different ways, and everybody looks at Westside Barbell as a powerlifting gym, and of course, right? But Louie was a strength and conditioning coach, right? And Louie always used to tell me, he's like, "What a better way to show people that you're a good strength coach to actually make people strong," So I always appreciate that about Lou, and I think it's an understanding people don't realize how good he was for any sport. He had something to bring to the table no matter what sport you're in. And, I learned a lot from him, and it's transferred to sport really well. As an athlete, as a kid growing up, I was in a lot of different sports, and God, I wish I had the knowledge then that I do now. But
always the case.
Always the case. But, this stuff that we do does transfer to everything, and so I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different types of people, which has been really interesting for me,
When you're totally dialed into your philosophy, no matter what it is, you'll start seeing it in all different aspects of life across different disciplines, completely unrelated. So when I talk about the 6 different components that build an athlete, those 6 different components are also critical for someone who's working on the stock exchange. You'll start seeing it everywhere. And you're one of my go-to guys for knowledge. You've been for lack of a better term, and my wife and I would say that, we're bona fide nerds. We like nerds, right? And in the strength and conditioning world, like you are
Yeah.
up there with one of the all time, nerds of knowing all the stuff.
Well, I
You
appreciate that.
from what I can
Thanks.
tell, you've been you've
Yeah.
been a meathead or into like getting better physically since
Mhm.
like junior high, high school, and all the way since then.
I've really been into it since I was about 4 or 5 years old, probably about 5 years old.
How
Four is
would
probably a
you
little early to say that.
how would you know that at 5 years old that you like this stuff? Like you're just watching strongman on TV?
So, I always loved output. I love performance in any aspect. I mean, that's why, like for me, like I have I have some cars and motorcycles because, and I don't drive them to the gym. I don't really care if anybody knows what I have because it's not about that. I enjoy racing motorcycles. I enjoy performance in cars. I like performance. I like the last 1%.
Right.
A lot of times I've heard stories or, you have some guys come to West Side and they're like, oh, well, here's our strongman went to West Side and the person, lifts, breaks a world record and then gets kicked out or, whatever, leaves. And then afterwards they're like, oh, well, I was going to eventually get that anyway. It's like, no, in the last 10 years, your number didn't go up at all. You went to West Side, your number went up, enough to break a world record. But you're saying, well, it wouldn't have mattered. Well, yes, it did. Louis got that last, and some people are like, well, Lou already got strong people. It's like, where were they at when they went there and what were they when they left? The last 1% is the most important percent. If you are in a boat and it goes down 3 miles offshore and you swim 99% of the way to shore, you still drowned. Okay.
Right.
So, the problem with that is that it's the best coaches in the world can get you that last 1%. There's a lot of coaches who get you the first 50%, a little less that can get you the 70%, a little less can get you to 80, 90. That last 1% is extremely valuable. Like if you're benching 100 pounds, it doesn't take a whole lot for a male to get to 100 pounds. It takes a little more to get to 200, a lot more to get to 300, a lot more to get 400. Every time you take another barrier, it takes twice as much work to go that same distance. What took it from 2 to 300, you'll need to do twice as much to go from 3 to 4. You need to do
Sure.
twice as much to go from 4 to 5, right? So that last 1%, that's
More.
a journey that's as big as that first 99% was,
Yeah. Yep.
So the knowledge to get that last 1% is quite a bit different. And that is where I've always tried to kind of get my realm to be. But how I knew really, in all honesty, when I was a kid, my dad, my dad was a boxer and he had a bad car accident. It kind of ended his career. My mom was into bodybuilding, was a personal trainer. I had real bad asthma as a kid. So I ran my first 5K at 4 years old. I ran my first 10K at 5 years old. And basically my parents sat me down and said, hey, in life, you're going to run into problems. When you run into those problems, you're going to face them head on and you're going to fight until you eliminate that problem. So you have asthma and in simple terms, you have weak lungs. So, you're going to spend half the week running with your dad, half the week running with my mom. We're going to get you in the gym training and, and you're going to just face the problem head on and you're not going to have to deal with it anymore. So I started kickboxing at a young age. I was in sports at a young age. And it was just one of those things that, I had stuff going on in my life as a little kid that I found it was very important for me to get strong and be able be capable. So it was always very important for me to have strength,
Just some self-preservation alone, right?
Yeah. From
So,
self-preservation alone, 100%.
I find a lot of some of the people in the powerlifting community, and I could always make generalizations, but a lot of times
Yeah.
those folks are pretty introverted, and I'll talk to them about, hey, how'd you get to this point? And they'll say, I was picked on when I was younger, or I was always by myself and I was getting kicked around and I was tired of that shit. So, I'm going to get strong. So one, I don't get my ass beat anymore. But then two, they're like, actually, they start to really learn about themselves and like the sport and love the sport. So that's, a lot of those folks, start out that way and then it starts fueling them for a long, long time.
When you get an athlete in front of you, and I say athlete, like I call my clients athletes, some of them don't compete in anything, but
Sure.
they're in there to improve their output, right? And some people, they want their kids to see a good quality of life and them take care of themselves. Some people want to break a world record. Everybody steps through the gym for the same reason. They want to improve their quality of life. Some people it's health. Some people it's to fix a problem. Some people, they want to accomplish something. Some want to be the best. It doesn't really matter what it is. You got to figure out what that client wants and help them, achieve that goal. But we do come through the doors for quality of life. And some of those people are in a fight for their life and you don't know it. Not everybody's going to walk up to you and say, Hey, I have stalkers trying to kill me. Hey, I get
I'm
beat by,
suicidal.
my husband. Hey, I don't have these issues. Nobody walks up and tells you that, So the sad part is someone, you'll hear people say, well, God, if I would have known that they were suicidal, if I would have known they were being picked on, I would have done this and this. It's like, well, why didn't you do that from the first place? Why'd you hold back? Because you're not going to know what the person's in front of you. Like they might just tell you, oh, I just like to look better, lose a little bit of weight. And you're like, oh, cool, no big deal. Um, it might be
That's
more than
you.
that.
That's usually the first level why they're there. But there's usually something
Mm-hmm.
underlying. So I call it the seven levels of why. Well, why are you here? And they'll say, well, I want to look, I want to lose some weight. Well, why is that important?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got a bad heart scan. Why is that important? Well, my dad died at 62. Personally, my dad did.
Mm-hmm.
And at 58, he was already kind of a wreck. So I'm like, shoot, I'm looking at his numbers. I'm looking at myself. I need to make some changes. So it's that third, fourth, fifth level. You start getting a little deeper, that why becomes a little bit more significant.
Yeah, I had my reasons that were significant for me, and then I've had clients that after training them over extended periods of time, um, you find out what their reason is, and trust me, I don't have to tell you, you own a gym and you're a coach, you've been a coach for a long time. If you own a gym long enough, you're a coach long enough, you'll meet some people with some incredible stories that you'll be actually shocked what they've made it through, or what's lying ahead for them. So don't do them a disservice by training them, kind of half-ass because you think they just want to lose a little bit of body fat, and that's easy and boring to you, right?
Sure.
Um, and then there's sometimes that's actually the reason why the person comes through the doors is they just maybe they're a little bored and they're not really happy with themselves. So they want to make some improvements, but then they end up being very capable of something, and you end up doing something where they could be the best in the world, right? And now their quality of life, their goal has changed to how they get the highest quality of life. And they might become something that you would have loved to train when they first walked through the door. But if you don't do your job in the first place, they might not develop far enough to ever get to that point where they actually become something in the world of sports that's at an ultra high level.
Sure.
Something that like some coach might consider fun.
It's also, you have to wear all these different hats as that coach, other than just
Mm-hmm.
someone who's smart. So, man, I tell people I'm part bartender, part priest over here. People
Mm-hmm.
start telling you anything, and you listen and you find out a little bit deeper as to why they're doing things. Then it becomes, you don't need to motivate them because they already, they're dialed in with their identity. So now it's just like, all right, now let's just take these steps forward. So you leave, you're in high school. So then walk me through high school to West Side. That's a number of years in between.
Okay, yeah, there's quite a few years in there. So, I was in like the kickboxing realm for about 16 years. Okay. I cycled competitively. So I did time trials, points races, road races, criteriums. I've done triathlons, all different distances in running. In I lifted weights in high school. Yeah, I was always intense. When I say like my mom was a personal trainer, like I learned a lot about technique, things like that. She didn't train athletes, so you train people to get in shape, be healthy, as far as that goes. So it was a little bit different, but you know, I was always on technique. I love lifting weight, and always pound for pound the strongest, the strongest kid, wherever I went. And most of the time, like in my high school, there's a lot of lifts that I was the strongest or among the strongest, right? Pound for pound, I was never getting beat. Like that just was in my school. That just was kind of it. Um, so I just was a more of a pretty naturally strong individual, and I had the drive to train real hard. I love training hard. Um, I actually really love the feeling of strain. It's like one of my favorite feelings in the world. Um, so that made it enjoyable for me. I'm a firm believer that people should try to evolve themselves mentally and physically every week, try to evolve as much as they can. People want results overnight, but that doesn't come like that, right? Like I've had very fast results for people. Obviously, as coaches, we all have our stories of like someone who got results even like kind of like blows our mind that it was so quick. But really, the big, good, permanent, long changes are stuff that takes time. And so, when we're talking about evolving mentally, evolving physically, that is, we can all disagree and agree on all kinds of things in this world. But I think it should be impossible to disagree that people should try to increase their psychological and physical capabilities every week of their life. And, there's a friend of mine who he has a podcast, and he worded this, and I'm not going to try to say it word for word because I'd probably butcher it, but I'll give you kind of the premises of this. that I think said it best. And Tosh Crooked Butterfly is what he goes underneath on his Instagram. I suggest everybody check it out. It's really good for like mental strength stuff, and he's got some good stuff going on. But he was saying, like, everybody, anybody who's mentally strong can become mentally weak. Anybody who's mentally weak can become mentally strong. And a lot of people do think that people are born that way, like, oh, they were born mentally tough, or whatever. And he made it in a very simple term. He's like, you take someone who's mentally tough and they start making poor decisions. Every poor decision they make, they become weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. You can take someone who's mentally weak, and if they just start making the right choice, not the easy one, the correct choice. If they start taking the correct choice and taking, which a lot of times is the hard way, the more they do that, the mentally tougher they become.
Sure.
If they make the correct choice every day and they don't ever take the easy way out, it's only a matter of time before they can become mentally tough. So, that mental toughness is no different than weight training, strength training, right? The more consistent you are, the more time you spend in that gym, the more PRs you knock down, the more physically capable you become, but you also start to become more psychologically capable because you're breaking through other barriers. And you start doing workouts where other people will start looking at you going, God, I don't know how you move that much weight on that. Like that exercise just kills me, like, man, your workouts I could never do that. Then you start thinking, okay, well, there's people who can't do what I can do. So like mentally I can push farther because they're not even, like, no one else in this gym is willing to do the workouts I'm willing to do. Right.
Right.
And so then you have that aspect. And then, so from that aspect, then you start saying, well, I need to surround myself with people who, the most mentally tough people I can find and the ones who will train the hardest. And then you end up surrounding yourself with those people. Right. And then you level up again and you keep just trying to do that. So, I was in sports, through high school and stuff. And lifting was always my thing. So I was, after I did a lot of endurance work, but I'm saying is like, I just ended up loving it. Right. So I remember in seventh grade is like when I really started. Before then I was lifting weights. I had a weight kit at home. My mom would work at the gym. So I'd go across the street from school, go to the gym. And then when she's done with clients, like she'd give me like workouts and exercises to do, and I'd do that stuff. And then she's done with clients, we'd go home. But then when I was in seventh grade, that's when I started getting books from the library or buying books. And that's what I'd read and study all the time with strength training books, which is funny because the people that I admired back then, I absolutely think they're, I appreciate that they paved a way, but I don't listen to any of the information, like a lot of the information that I took in at the time.
Sure.
Like I'll just give you a quick example. I used to see exercises, right? And I was like, man, how intelligent are these strength coaches to know what movements are healthy and which ones are unhealthy for an individual and what exercise they need? And how do they sit there and take a 4-year plan and get someone ready for the Olympics and know every week what their number should be, running the 100, running the 400? Like how many 100-meter sprinters do you need to see? How many, 200-meter, how many 400-meter before you can lay out the times for all this? Well, while there's people who do that, I don't believe in that system, right? Back then, I looked at that and I was like, wow, these people are brilliant, absolutely brilliant, because I'm thinking, how much data do you have to collect to be able to give actually precise information? And so
Man,
then,
for 4 years to have that mapped out with no deviation. Are you kidding?
yeah, right. So then we flash forward to when I get to Westside Barbell. And at Westside Barbell one day, when I was first there, I asked Lou, I said, you've invented a lot of exercises, okay? I said, when I was a kid, I always wondered, like, how did you learn what was safe and not safe? And he said something that changed the way I looked at training for the rest of my life. And he said, if your body can achieve the position, it should be able to optimally accelerate out of the position. He goes, there shouldn't be an unhealthy position that your body can get into. He goes, you only have dysfunction in joint, or you don't. You either have balance or you don't, right? So if your muscles are balanced, you have full function in your joint, any angle that your body can get into, you should be able to optimally accelerate out of. So there should, in a sense, almost be no bad exercises. I'm not saying there's not some bad exercise. What I'm saying, though, is there's a lot of movements that we could do if we had full function of our joints and no dysfunction in our joints whatsoever, and we were perfectly balanced, that we would have a different outlook on a lot of different exercises.
Right. So then a lot of times with athletes, you're trying to maximize how they can perform given how dysfunctional they can be mentally and physically. So, if they can't squat all the way down below parallel, but they're still playing football and they have to get stronger, all right, well, we're going to get you stronger, but we're not squatting all the way down below parallel. Or someone else, like your spine's going to be out of alignment for whatever
Hmm.
reasons, and you're still going to have to go train some days, and you still get adjusted and such. But your body's always adapting and trying to work despite its own limitations.
Yeah. So here's the problem that we have, right? And this is a problem that I see often in coaching. And the problem is that you're not going to have any athlete or anybody that comes through your door who has full function of all their joints, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And everybody has different variations of levels of dysfunction. So when I say full function of a joint, like ideally you like to have it of all of it, what you need is full function of every joint and within the use of the sport the athlete's doing, and that then they can stay safe, right?
Right.
So, every time like you exceed the capacity of that joint, meaning like if you have a X amount of range of motion and then you have dysfunction shows up, you start creating a joint in another area, right? So let's say your hip runs out of space and you have a dysfunction in your hip. Well, then you
Mm-hmm.
start to put torque into your low back or your knee, right? So some people start complaining about their low back. It's like, okay, well, let's check out the range of motion in your hip.
Yeah, that's right.
And so then we need to clear that, right? And then we need to give them range that they're going to live in. Like, what's your everyday life and what's your sport? You bare minimum, it'd be nice to have full function of the joint, but
Right.
we at least have to have full access to every range we're going to get in our sport and in our training. Okay. Because if
Yeah.
we don't have that, we're going to run into issues. So, often when I go to a gym, when we're talking about technique, I think people, kind of make technique a little bit harder than it should be. Most of the time, if you've watched my athletes, they all squat, they look the same, they should bench the same, they deadlift the same. And I've had people at me say, man, I can always tell who your lifters are because they all look the same lifting. I'm like, they should.
Right.
Why would they all look different? Isn't there an optimal way? Or Lou used to say there's two ways to do it. One way is the right way and the wrong way, right?
Right.
But the thing is, what I'll see, like a lot of times teaching seminars, I show up to a gym and before a seminar, you'll see a guy in the back corner squat, knees caving in, chest dropping. He looks like he's about to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking over there, and a lot of times the owner or coach will walk up and like, oh, that's so and so. For the last 2 years, that I've been telling him to push his knees out for 2 years, and he won't listen. Oh, so and so over there, and they want to show you their strongest lifter, right? Oh, so and so just clean and jerk this, or just squatted this, or just deadlifted this. Well, I have an issue with this person over here with their knees caving in.
Right. For sure.
Because my problem is this: if they don't listen and you're the coach, okay, this is actually not the norm. I would tell you this is less than 1% of the time. It's not that they're not listening. I will tell you this: if you're a coach and they fall among that 1% who truly just doesn't listen to you as a coach, here's the best tool for them. It's called a door. Turn the handle,
Right.
open it, tell them to leave. If they're not going to listen to you as a coach, they're just going to be a disruption for everybody else in the gym. They're not a good representation of your gym. If you want someone to walk through your doors and think this is how you coach people, that's not great for you, as well. And it's probably a wake-up call they're going to need if they want to stay healthy, right? What do you want them to do? Stay at your gym, get hurt, and then try suing you because they got hurt at your gym, But that's like less than 1%, right?
Sure.
99% of the time, what it is pretty simple. Here's how I think about it. If you can't achieve the position, it's one of two things in technique. It's either a mobility issue or it's a strength issue. So all you have to do right now is decide and decipher as a coach which one it is. So when I look at that individual, think about this. If I say push your knees out 1 or 2 times and you can't push your knees out in a squat, 2 years later, do you think I'm going to keep saying push your knees out? As definition of insanity is the same thing over and over again,
Over and over
expect a
again.
different
Right. Yeah.
result, right? So
He's just not strong enough to be able to use his glutes to push his knees out.
what I would say is,
Right.
yeah, I look at, well, I can't ask something of somebody if they
They
can't
can't
do
do
it.
it. Right.
If being a coach is just telling someone what to do, I'm going to, hey, Jim, run a 2-minute mile. Wouldn't that be cool? Everybody's
That'd
going
be
to
cool.
love it. Like, look at this big
Right.
guy, totally blew out the world record. Didn't even train for it. Like, this is
Yeah.
truly amazing.
I just told him to do it.
Yeah, we just tell everybody what we want them to do, and let's do some really cool stuff, right? So, but that's not the case, right? You have to ask yourself: is the person physically capable of doing what I'm asking them to do? Okay, like Lucas, Jim. If you've ever been in, like when we were in high school or anything, if you were ever in a class and for whatever reason you were lost on the news on the subject that you were on, like say they start a new math and like after the first day, like, oh man, I'm lost. I don't know where I'm at on it. By the next day you go in, I'm finding Jim. I'm sitting behind him, making myself as small as I can be, right? Because I don't want to be seen. And if
Right.
anybody's been in that situation, that you hated when the teacher called on you when you were lost because you hated feeling, like you weren't intelligent. I hated it when it was free. I'm not going to pay someone to make me feel like that.
Yeah,
Okay. So if
exactly.
someone's paying to come in your gym, don't want to make them feel like that. Right. So I start thinking, all right, let's watch their squat. Let's say I'd say push their knees out. If their knees are out and I'm saying knees out, and their knees are halfway down and their knees come in, on the way up, their knees stay in the same spot, they come back out. Now we know it's a mobility issue because they're listening, they're trying.
Right.
They can't maintain that knee position. But if I tell them knees out and their knees are out on the way down and then they come in before they go up, well, now I know that either their hamstrings or glutes are a weakness for them, right?
Right.
Because they need to get it into their quads. So then I'll make an adjustment in their special exercises to fix that problem, to balance out the body. Then when I give them a cue, they should do that. Oh my God, that feels great. I don't know. I've never squatted like that before. Well, when your body's balanced, it's going to feel natural to you. When I get you in those positions, they might not feel natural when your body's not ready for it. When I get you balanced and get you the function we need out of your joints to achieve the position that we want, then it's going to feel natural. And it's very easy to teach a technique when the body wants to be in those positions.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
So I break, in technique, and I break it down. Is it a combination of strength? Is it a combination of strength and mobility, or is it just mobility to strength? And, something pretty easy to think about is if someone's doing a body weight squat for me. And if I ask Lucas, hey, I want to see a body weight squat, and he does one and it's perfect. Now I know he has enough mobility and range for a squat. Maybe not
Sure.
anything else, but a squat he does. And then I put 135 on his back and his knees cave in. Well, I know it's a strength issue. He can't
Sure.
maintain position. It's that simple.
Right.
Okay. So if you're a coach out there and you're saying the same thing to people over and over again, start looking at what accessory movements you need to do to fix the problem in the way the athlete moves that will allow you to teach them the technique you want them to have. It's not necessarily the person's not listening.
Now there's the art and then there's the science, and both are critical in getting the athlete to perform. And then it's on the coach to decipher, hey, maybe it's the cue, maybe it's maybe they can do it or not. Maybe they're not hearing me, but you have to keep going through this Sherlock Holmes detective style of figuring out what the actual problem is, and then solving it over and over and over again. And all we do all day long is solve problems, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Working towards a certain end. So you're over at West Side, and I remember I even saw you had a small role in the West Side versus the World movie, even, right?
Yeah.
So and there's lots of great stories in there. It's narrated great, and there's a lot of drama and actually producing the movie, but not everything gets put in there either, right? So what's a story or two that people wouldn't know that's not in the film that you're like, oh man, they should have put this one in instead?
As far as stories and that go, I'm trying to remember what's in it, because there was a lot of footage that was edited out. So sometimes it's like trying to remember what they add in. Like, because for my interview, it was a couple hours long. So there's only like a fraction in there. Like, you hear my voice in the background, a little bit during the movie or whatever. I like to say I'm the Morgan Freeman of the West Side Video. I'm just kidding. No, you only hear like two things out of me, so it's nothing. I'm just kidding. But but I will say something here. This give me time to think about maybe a potentially funny story, but actually, you know what? I do have one. There was a lifter that came in that was very, very strong, and he was with West Side for a little while, and he had a lot of potential to be number one in the world. And Louis was getting kind of irritated because he wasn't training as doing all the exercise and stuff he wanted him to do, right? So, Louis says one day, he's like, grab a wheelbarrow, we're going around the building. He's like, oh, Lou, I'm exhausted. And Lou's irritated, like, grab a wheelbarrow, let's go around the building. Sorry, Lou, I'm just too tired. So Louis picks up this wheelbarrow and trucks all around the building. He's probably, early mid-60s at this time. And he goes all the way around the building.
The wheelbarrow's not light. It's a training tool. It's not like an empty wheelbarrow from Lowe's.
No,
right.
This thing was loaded down to 45s all over the place. So okay, Christmas tree of 45s, right?
Right.
And so this is something that a strong person would have a fun time going 100 yards with, right? A strong person.
Yep.
And so he goes all the way around. You've been to West Side, right? He went around both buildings. So there's a big, long building unit, like storage unit, kind of like it reminds you of. And then there's a second building. It's detached. There's two lanes to go back and forth between them. And there's a whole nother building. So he goes around both these buildings. Comes back by, looks inside the door, guy's still sitting there. And you can see a look on his face like he is just livid.
Right.
And he goes around again, and the guy's still sitting there. Goes around again, and you're sitting there like, Louis not putting this thing down. Like, he's humping, right?
Right.
And so finally we're like, I can't remember who said it, but someone's like, man, like, he's going to kill you. You need to leave. Like,
Right.
he is ticked. He has not put this thing down. He is going, like, he is mad, And so, the guy ends up leaving, and Louis finally comes back, puts it down, and he's just like irate mad, like, you're too tired. He's like, I'm in my 60s. I'm going around here. I don't even compete anymore. He's like all, ticked off,
Right.
and he's just going around and around. But, the thing is, like, he didn't expect anything from you that he wouldn't do. Try to do the volume he did, bring the intensity as long as he did. Like, he brought it. So I thought that was funny. But there's something that I can mention now because Lou's no longer around. One day I was at Westside, and Lou had this big excursion, Ford Excursion truck, which, they're like a Suburban, they're massive, right?
Yep.
And the whole back was full of boxes, like shoe boxes. So Lou gets out, walks by, and hey, Lou, I go, did you design a shoe or something? He goes, no. And he starts like, grumbling really quick and walks by. I can't understand half what he's saying. So Amy Weisberger walks through. I go, hey, Amy, I go, did Lou design a shoe or something? I was like, I asked him, but he kind of, walked away or whatever. And she kind of looks around, she's like, all right, well, he doesn't like anybody knowing this. She's like, he bought that for the homeless shelter, and he's taking the shoes down to them after the gym. She goes, he doesn't, I was like, that's cool. That's a good thing. Like, I don't know why I would be, kind of not want anybody to know about it. She's like, well, Lou, and I think this is an amazing thing. She goes, Lou takes clothes down there. He will, take shoes. He takes stuff down to help out. She's like, Lou does a lot of charity work, doesn't want people to know, because he feels that if people know that you're doing it for yourself, not for the actual charity and what it should be meant for. So he doesn't like anybody knowing that he does any of that stuff, because he doesn't want it to be about him or people to praise him, because it should be something you do, not something you should get praised for doing, because this is just how humans should treat each other.
Wow.
And I bring that up because, a lot of people like refer to like Lou as like the Bobby Knight of powerlifting, and I'm not saying he wasn't.
Right.
But they think that that's necessarily bad. Sometimes what is bad for one person's phenomenal for another. Because you couldn't handle it doesn't mean it wasn't something that absolutely changed someone else's life and made it phenomenal for them. I look at that as a teaching or training technique, is that he knew how to get the most out of lifters mentally and physically. And that's not going to be for everybody. Just like, you can go on a date with somebody, you're like, hey, they're attractive, they're nice. We just don't seem like we communicate real well.
Sure.
Does it mean
Right.
they're a bad person? No, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. I think sometimes people would lift and they take it as an insult. And I can tell you now that later on as a coach, I see very clearly how to make someone a world record holder, how to make them a world champion, how to get them to be best in the world. I actually kind of feel in a way that's, something that's kind of easy for me to see. The hard part is communicating to another individual the thought process and how they will have to view things to get to be number one. A lot of times when people think they're making an improvement, I see them as going backwards, or they're making an improvement, but I see them not going in the right direction. So to me, they're wasting time and energy, where they're happy, like, oh, I improved, I did this, and, whatever. And they get all excited. I'm like, this is not the plan. This is not the way. I sat down and talked to you and told you exactly how to do this, exactly how we get there. And so if I don't get as excited about something they think was an accomplishment because I thought it was a waste of time, then they're like, oh, he doesn't care. I was going, well, no, I care, but you didn't listen. And when you don't listen, I just don't talk anymore. Like I don't have to tell you what to do. I don't, I do it because I want to do it. And if you're not going to listen, I'll go spend more time with someone else who will, because why would I waste my breath when there's someone who's going to listen who can get more out of it. I still care about you, still hope you do phenomenal. But if you're not listening, I'm not going to waste my time. It's a disrespect to me, in a sense, is the way I feel about it.
Sure.
And, if you want a great athlete, if you want an athlete to make it far, you have to have the right coach and the right athlete, and then they have to build a relationship of trust. And that means that athlete has to be able to trust that coach inside and out. And when that athlete has a coach they can trust, all they have to do is listen.
Yeah.
And everything will work out,
My that's my doggy. Sorry about to edit that one out. I was doing this Bavarian stone lift. It's this old lift. It's all stones, and historically, a good lift is 508. I don't know how they came up with the number over in Europe, some Eastern Bloc, but it's like a. All right, so I'm doing this lift, right? It's downtown, and it's for fun. What they do is they ladder up. It's 50-pound jumps, and it's at this German fest, and so we're kind of like this circus show, but a bunch of big boys show up to do this one lift, and I've been wanting to do this Bavarian lift, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it, and you don't stop at 508. If you can keep going, it's 558, then 608, and whatever else. So, my wife and I, Jen, we've been to your seminars, we've worked and followed, all your teachings and Louis and Tom's and Dave Tate's and all the Conjugate stuff. So she's knowledgeable, and she's watched me lift for so many years that she knows when I'm making a mistake, or I trust her that when she sees the speed of the lift, how much more I have. So I'm getting ready. I did 508, and these people that they're drunk, and they're like, hey, squat down real low, and get your knees into it. And it's a high pick for a quasi sumo stance, and so it's real favorable for me. And so I do the lift, and I look over at Jen, and she gives me a thumbs up, which means go to the next one, which is 558. And I hit that one, and she just goes, I'm like, all right. So she means one more. I'm like, so it's 608, and you're elevated on this platform. It's 4 feet off the ground, and it's a real small window. So I had the guy behind me. I said, I pulled 600 only a couple times, so I just need you behind me in case I kind of black out. And I looked at her, and because I know, to your point, Shane, that if she says I have it, then I have it. All I have to do is, grab on and go through my progression when I'm performing the lift. And I picked the weight off the ground, but I haven't finished the lift yet, and it's taken me a while. I'm like 3, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, but it's still incrementally moving it up. And I noticed like it's getting dark real quick, and I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of blacking out here. So I finish the lift, and I get my down command, and I put it down, and I inhale, and it's like all the lights turned back on. I was like, oh, great, and I was like, oh, but to your point is that I wouldn't have. On that day, I put my decision-making process in the coach, and I just have to go. Actually, I just have to go out and execute. So since she and I've been coaching and training for so many years, I'm like, if she says I have it, then I have it. And so you need to have that trust in that relationship. And if she didn't, there weren't many other folks I would say, come down here and watch me. And she's like, all right, I got you.
Yeah, and that's a great story, because that's the exact truth of it. It's when you're underneath a lift, sometimes lifts feel like they're longer than they are to us. It's really hard when you're actually in the lift to know how long it took. And sometimes every lifter out there, if you don't believe me, just watch a video of one of your lifts when you think you're really slow, a lot of times it's happened a lot faster than what you think it did.
Right.
So having a coach who's seen your speeds and sees how much you have left, that's how I gauge my athletes when they go up is, what was their position and what was the speed of the lift. And I know my lifters, so I'll know what they're capable of. And to take pressure off my lifters, if my lifters listen to me, I will never ask something from them that they cannot do.
Right.
So like by the third attempt, if it's a dogfight for a massive total, yeah, I might ask a high number out of you, but it's one you can do, might be as long as you do it perfect, but it will never be a number that you can't do. I'm not swinging for fences or hoping. I don't say, hopefully they will this one. No, there's no such thing. Like there is perfect technique, and you attack into the best of your ability, and you either have or you don't, right?
Yep.
So, they know that I will not ask a number of them that they're not physically capable of that day. It just depends on, can you reduplicate enough to do this, right? Technique-wise, same thing for me. For a lot of coaches out there, make it pretty simple. If the weight is the same and you adjust technique and the bar is faster, the technique's better. If you adjust the technique and it's slower, the technique's not as good, right? So I use speed for a lot of things, and I think this is one thing that a lot of coaches who are young could really look at. When I see someone move through motion in a sport, I look at where are they fast, where are they slow through the range of the movement. And that can tell me what muscle groups are weak, or potential mobility issues, or potential issues where they need to increase the strength in those muscle groups. So then I think, okay, well, what muscle group is being used? That's one thing I need to increase speed. And then what joint issues could potentially slow that movement down. And then I'll check to see what their mobility in those ranges are. The mobility is great. Then we know it's just pure strength and leverage them correctly in that area. If the mobility is, an issue, part of an issue, well, we'll address that as well. Just realize though that majority of mobility issues that you will have be due to a weakness, right? And I might go to someone and say, oh, yeah, there's a weakness. Like, well, I'm a 900-pound deadlifter. I'm not weak. No, I didn't say you were weak. So there's a weakness. If the rest of your body is capable of 1,100-pound deadlift and one body part's capable of 900, that's the weak one.
That's
Pretty
the weak
simple,
one, right? Yeah, right.
right? Doesn't mean you're weak, but it is the weakness in you,
Sure. And everybody has them.
And everybody has them. I mean, that's the whole point of having a strength coach, to eliminate them and keep moving up, right?
You have to keep hunting for that weak link that holds you back and then elevate.
Correct. So speed won't lie to you. Like it will tell you something. You will know where that person, even just like speed through a bench press. If someone's slow off their chest and they pick up speed the second half, or they fast off the chest and they lose speed the second half. Do they lose speed in the middle? Do they lose it at the top? Where do they lose it at? What muscle groups involved? If their technique is perfect, then if their technique's not perfect, you have to adjust that technique and then you reassess, right? But you have something to look at. You're like, okay, we're going to readjust the technique. Now let's see if it's in the same spot,
Gotcha. Yep.
And that's all it is. So, I think a lot of times coaches, coaches when they're young, they watch other coaches give cues. So they think it's cues only, and cues are great. You have to have them. But we need to get a little quicker on thinking about range of motion in the joints and balancing out the tissue. So, if Jim when he was 16, if he got in a car accident, he hit his brakes real hard and hit something, maybe he jams his hips up and creates a mobility issue, right?
Sure.
But outside of stuff like that, usually what it is an imbalance, right? That mobility issue in your hip could be because you're imbalanced your quad and hamstring. It could be because you're doing wide stance movements, but since your hamstrings are weak, your knees caving so hard against their will that it's straining the hip. It could be because you only do narrow stance stuff and you don't do anything wide. So when you go do anything wide, you don't have that range available to you, but you'll go to it anyway, because if you're in sport, you don't have a choice. I can't sit there if I'm wrestling and go, hey, no wide stance anything. I just don't train wide stance, man. Sorry.
Sure, right.
You can't ask sports to be put on hold, right? So when we look at that stuff, we want to make sure that we're balancing our body out. And the first thing I hunt for if I see a lack of range of motion is I'm looking for what's weak. What is causing a breakdown in a movement pattern that's creating more torque and wear on the body? And then I'm going to eliminate that. It's no different than when people go to like a massage therapist, say, oh, my back's bothering me. And they get worked on by a massage therapist. And they're like, man, and you talk to them like 3 days later, like, hey, how was your massage? Like, oh, that day I felt great. Next day I felt really good. But like 2-3 days later, it started to come back. So, they were okay. Well, no, that's not the massage therapist's fault. The massage therapist, if you are feeling better the next day and you have more range available the next day, they did their job.
Right.
The problem could be is that maybe you don't have enough articulation in your toes or your ankle, so your gait's not proper. When your gait's not proper, that's going to start tightening your hips back up. And after a few days of being in an improper position, an improper gait, guess what? Your hip issue's back to where it was, and you now have the same amount of torque on your low back that you did before. That's what this stuff is. So, being able to decipher that is a big deal for a coach.
I call the low back the redheaded stepchild of the body. Everyone says I have a bad low back, and I'm like, well, let's look at your hamstrings and your butt, or are your hip flexors tight? What's your stance look like, or do you sit all day? Is your upper back weak too? So the low back is like the catch-all for everything because it's a smaller group, but it's usually somewhere else that the problem is. I've had a tight low back before, and I'll get worked on, and the first thing the trainer's doing on it, she has her elbow in my upper back to loosen that up. And I go, and you realize right then and there that my low back is now loosened up, and she didn't even touch it. She worked on the other area where the actual problem was. One of the questions I send on our guests, and I sent it to you, was, what are some things you'd like to discuss? And you simply write, how to find and prescribe fixes for deficiencies. And so I have a number of questions, and this will be like quick. So ceteris paribus, meaning all else equal, assuming their technique is good and their range of motion is good, I'm going to say, hey, here's a problem. Most likely, what is the issue? Okay. So we'll just start with, since powerlifting is the three main movements. So just with bench,
Mm-hmm.
The bar's coming down and it's a bit wobbly.
Mm-hmm.
What's weak?
So, usually, if it's a bit wobbly, there's a couple things we look at. One, I look at your body as a foundation, is how I explain it. Your legs should be dug in, wide stance to create good stability left to right. Most people do not flex their glutes the whole way through the range of motion. This is why you see people put the bar back in the hooks, because they usually have their glutes relaxed on the way down. When they go to press up and they flex their glutes, the bar comes backwards into the uprights.
Sure.
So what I'm going to do for that athlete, I want a wide stance. I want to find the proper angle for their shins and knees so that they can leg drive as hard as possible without their butt coming off the bench. I'm going to make them flex their glutes, tighten up their spinal erectors, and pull their shoulder blades together as tight as possible. And then you pull the bar apart. The combination of all those things should keep the bar from moving. If you pull the bar apart properly, it cannot go left or right or up and down unevenly. It has to come down perfectly even and go up perfectly even, loading both shoulders evenly, but also not keep you from going back and forth. The wide stance also keeps you from going back and forth. And then obviously keeping your glutes and your whole body tight. That's your foundation. The only thing that should move in that are your arms. Everything, I plant my head. I don't move my head. I don't move anything.
All right, bring it down, and it's slow off the chest, but faster through the second half of the lift. So
Okay. So if it's slow off the chest, two things I'm going to look at. Either technique that you tuck your elbows, and that's why you're slow off the chest, or if you don't tuck your elbows and it's a weakness, then I'm looking at upper back to get you off the chest.
you're good off the chest. But the second half of the lift and locking out is slow.
That's all triceps.
Right.
So we hit triceps real hard, but that also is pulling the bar apart. Okay, keeping the bar in its proper path is big for that. But also, what a lot of people don't realize, I really hate to say breaking the bar because most people break the bar wrong. They break it till they tuck their elbows in, which is really hard on your shoulders on a bench. We like to stretch and pull the bar apart. And that allows us to activate our triceps sooner and keep the bar perfectly loaded in both shoulders, which also helps us lock weight out too. But there is a way to break the bar that helps lock it out. Like if I'm an inch or two away from lockout and I feel the speed slowing down so much, I don't know if I'm going to lose it. I don't break the bar, like this, like most people think. I actually break the bar away from me. What I'm doing is using my forearms to finish that lockout.
Right.
Okay. So if
Yep.
my triceps don't have enough gas, I can actually break the bar away, and I can, by putting that pressure into the bar, it will straighten out. My forearms will straighten out my elbow for me.
That last bit, man, it's that area just above your elbow. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
and conius.
right. So if I'm weak there, I'm like,
Yeah.
and I've done that. You do the exercises. I'm like, oh my god, it hurts every time I do this right above my elbow.
Mm,
Until you do it enough time and you strengthen it up, like, oh, that was the limiting factor. Now,
mm,
dealing with other athletes, sometimes they have to put weight overhead, and
mm,
everything comes down in your front rack, and you're slow from here from your front rack to
mm,
above your head, but you're
mm.
faster on the lockout.
Okay.
So on a strict military press or shoulder press.
On a strict press,
Yeah, right.
we we hit a lot of front delt stuff, and also have to hit upper back to create a stable base,
Yep.
to press off of. Is typically what I would do with that.
And the second half is going to be triceps again. The second half of the lift.
Second half is usually going to be triceps. Yeah. It also can be technique depending on, are they pushing straight up and their forearms are in front of them, or are they pushing their head through? So we have to look at that. But just from the strength point, I'm going to look at triceps. But triceps also include, are you training the upper mass of your tricep, or are you training the conius extensor stabilizer in the bottom? Because you might press with good triceps, but you might, the last inch or two, have a problem with that, where then conius could be definitely a part to help fix that issue.
Gotcha. I was talking about one of my coaches. Well, he doesn't he coach for us, but he coaches a lot of youth baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about deadlifting and helping kids. And I go, if I want kids to move laterally, I wouldn't really have them conventional deadlift as much. I would
Yeah.
work more on sumo. So you talk
Mm-hmm.
about how sumo deadlift impacts lateral movement for athletes.
So, sumo pull. So I'll tell you, West Side Barbell, if you were an athlete, not a power lifter, you
Right.
weren't going to pull. Like most of the time, you'd actually never pull conventional. Louis trained sumo almost exclusively for athletes. A couple of reasons: they're not a competitive power lifter. That's not what they're trying to fortify themselves to do. They're trying to fortify themselves for their sport. So you are a little more open to back injuries from conventional and sumo. So the sumo one is easier for an athlete on their back. But the reason why we would do it is because when you're wide stance, you have to spread the floor with your feet. You're literally driving your legs out to the side, right? So that position is loading in the side of your hips, right?
Yep.
So the more powerful your hips are in the lateral movement, that is your side to side movement that you have in sport, right?
Yep.
So that's where that wide stance set would be important. The one thing that I do see common, I see a lot of, in football teams and schools, in different sports, is they'll only train narrow stance squats. And I always hear people go, "Oh, that's not a real squat if you go box squat or wide stance." The problem is and they say, "Oh, it doesn't translate over." It's like, really? Have you ever seen somebody get in a 3-point stance with their feet side by side real close together? I haven't.
Right.
You see wrestlers with a really narrow base, really doesn't happen.
Nope.
What is any athletic stance? Feet wide, hips back, like your
Right.
hips, back, right?
Down and ready.
Exactly. So I'm like, so why doesn't it transfer to lift in a similar position,
Right.
But when you're doing conventional, yeah, it's going to be low back, hamstrings, glutes. It's in a straight line. You're pressing straight down with your legs. It's not going to really help your hips. Just like I said earlier, a lot of people do. So you see this in CrossFit a lot. And when I say that, I'm not knocking CrossFit. It's just CrossFit, you have a lot to do in a week, between the gymnastic stuff, the endurance stuff, all the skill set movements, Olympic lifting, powerlifting movements. There's so many different movements in CrossFit. But the problem in WODs, when you look at these, the workouts of the day, is that how often do you see something that's wide stance or lateral? It's almost
Well,
never.
pretty much never. Yeah. Right.
Right. But when I do seminars with CrossFitters, and I'm not picking on them, like they're in good shape. I'm just saying that they do so much work that they sometimes lose sight of that we need to do some things that are wider. And that I'm telling you, I feel like 9 out of 10 of them, 8 out of 10 of them have hip mobility issues that I think are pretty bad and severe especially for the type of shape that most of them are in. Right. So that does come directly down to doing narrow stance stuff only and not going into your wide stance stuff.
If I took an athlete, whether it's a CrossFitter or not, or football player, basketball player, and they're always just doing a certain range of motion or set of lifts. So let's say they're squatting kind of narrow, or they're deadlifting, or they're even trap bar deadlifting, and they're kind of narrow. And I say, all right, we're done with that for the next 6 months. Everything's going to be wide. We're going to box squat wide, and we're going to do sumo. And then we come back later, and they're like, well, my other main lifts, they actually went up, and we haven't been doing them. And I said, sure, I just took the area that you've never trained, and I built that up around it. Everything else stayed the same. So overall, net, you're stronger. And they're like, oh, yeah, what?
Well,
so you just take an area that hasn't been built up, and I take the low hanging fruit, and I improve that, and then their main movements improve.
Yeah. In the simple, so if you think about a deadlift, think about it this way. Sumo pullers are very poor at getting weight off the ground. They're very poor at locking weight out. They're really good through the middle. Conventional pullers are really good at breaking weight off the ground, very good at locking weight out. They're very poor through the middle. If you find someone who's really well balanced in a conventional pull, right around their knees is the tell-all, whether they're going to make that lift or not, right?
Furthest part away from the body.
Sumo, yeah. Right. So when you do sumo, you're working the hips, the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you switch that back to conventional, you work the area that is the weakest part of the lift for conventional puller. But when you train conventional, you're really good at breaking weight off the ground and locking weight out, which is training the two things that is hard for a sumo puller, right? So they're synergetic. I've always believed, like Louis said this, and I've seen nothing but proof through the athletes I've worked with. We train both of them equal. And then sometimes for some people, we train the opposite a little more frequently than they train their competitive stance. And that's where we get the best results out of lifts. And we've had a lot of world record holders in deadlift, in equipment, out of equipment. I'm talking just from my gym, not let alone West Side, multiple weight classes. I can teach a deadlift, and it's one of those things that I 100% believe in. But it also comes down to another level than just what I said about where the conventional and sumo pullers are weak or strong at. It comes down to another thing too. And that is that you have to introduce 15% or more new exercises to an athlete every year to learn new movement at the fastest rate possible. So by having these different techniques and positions, it makes the athlete more athletic. It allows them to execute at the highest ability, right? What you want is for an athlete to be able to do a movement without thinking and do it perfectly every time. It's just locked in, like it's laser-like, right? So if they do limited movement, it makes it very hard for them to pick up something new. So for me, if I do the conjugate system with Jim, right, and Jim trains all these different stances and position, then he wants to go do a strongman. He's like, oh, I haven't done strongman in a while. I want to do that. Well, implements are never the same. You can say, well, yeah, farmer's walk, a farmer's walk. Sure, go to a bunch of different competitions and see how that works out for you.
They're different
Some
all the
of them
time.
thinner handles, thicker handles.
Sure.
Yep.
It could be
Yep.
a longer implement. And then you get into
Yeah.
stones and everything else, right? So then there's the
And very
balances.
correct. And very rarely is that apparatus the actual weight they said it was going to be for a competition. It could be less, it could be a lot, it can be more. A lot of times it's a lot more.
Sure.
So, when you show up to these strongman events, people are like, oh my God, like I practiced with 1,000 pound yoke and I thought I was gonna be fine. And I picked this thing up. I was like, whoa, this is not 1,000 pounds, it's way beyond that.
Right.
Doesn't matter. You're in the middle of a. Now, you better get up and move.
Right.
So the thing is, the more variety we send to as an athlete, they learn to pick up new movement faster. So in the middle of a strongman event, which is always implements that you might have touched that implement, but not that exact one. There's
Right.
always a variable in strongman. When you go lift stones, Jim, like we go overseas, if you want to go to Scotland and you go all over through Europe lifting different stones and go to Spain and that, they're all different. And
All the
trust me,
manhood stones, yep.
whatever stone you think you made at home to help you, yeah, sure, there's parts that'll help you, it'll help the muscle groups, but it doesn't necessarily help you articulate how to grip, how to hold, where you get your best leverage from until you actually hold that exact stone, right?
Yep.
But what you'll do is you'll be able to pick it up and make your adjustments faster. The more variety of ways that you've lifted weight before and the different positions and different apparatuses will only build a skill set that's substantially higher. And if your body's balanced perfectly, it'll be even easier for your body to find those positions. You can actually, they did a study, this is years ago in like the late 70s, they did a study with Russian weightlifters, Bulgarian weightlifters, and pro soccer players. And I've never seen the movement because I've only read the article about it. So I don't know what it was, but they said it was an Olympic style movement that none of them have ever seen before. So they picked something that was like Olympic lifting movements. They developed a movement just for the sole purpose of this test. The Russians were the fastest to pick it up. Obviously, they train the conjugate system. They see more variety than everybody else at the time in lifting. Bulgarians are all about the classic lift, so they have the least amount of variety. They had the hardest time picking up. The soccer players actually lifted more weight than the Bulgarian weightlifters in this Olympic style movement because the variety in sport, because they all do lifting for training, that they play soccer, and so they do a lot of different variety. So it was just showing how variety helps athletes, and they did studies on it and realized that it was 15% or more new movements a year to learn at the fastest rate possible. And I've seen that with my athletes in the past, is that the more variation you give them, the harder it is for a weakness to hide. Every time as an athlete, I find a weakness, I go after it, right? And we're trying to eliminate them all the time. So the less variety you have, the harder it is for a coach to find your weaknesses and eliminate all of those weaknesses. No matter how minute and small, it needs to be eliminated. So when we have more variety, it allows us as a coach to do our job better, but it also allows the athletes to make adjustments on the field faster and makes them appear to be more athletic and more successful in their endeavor.
Oh man, huge points, huge points. And I'll see that when I host competitions and people will say, well, in my training, I did this. And I said, yeah, well, in a nice, controlled environment, you're rested, no one's watching, you did X or you lifted this. But now that you're on the platform in front of folks or you're carrying these implements in front of folks, it's different. That's why it's a sport. And you have practices in tennis or football so that on game day, you have a better shot of adapting and performing. But game day is different. What the weather is different. People around you are different. How you feel. Maybe your digestion system is off. Maybe there's people in the stands. Maybe you work because your girlfriend's now watching you, or the implement feels different. That's why it's a sport, and that's what makes it a sport. If everything was in a controlled vacuum, then it's not that. It's more of a science project.
Yeah, it's experiment then.
Right. Mindset wise, intensity. There's a lot of different definitions of intensity. Like you're lifting the most weight, or you're going with the least amount of oxygen, there's intensity. But to adapt and cause adaptation, there's a level of intensity. Mentally, it has to be there as well. You have to, have mentally focus and the drive and be able to sit through discomfort, right? And you listen to Tim Grover, who's a coach for a strength coach for Jordan and others. They'll say all these athletes have some kind of dark place every once in a while that they have to go to get through some of the pain and suffering, whether it's in the middle of the contest or the sport or even their own training. how often do you see that, when you're at Westside or with your own athletes, that sometimes, they have to be able to, there's a dark side to them that they have to be able to control so they can tap into that last 1% you were talking about at the beginning of the show?
A lot of your great lifters have that for sure. Chuck Vogelpohl obviously was Mr. Intensity. He was known for it. Dave Hoff, they always say he can go to a really dark spot and attack it. And obviously no one needs to introduce those two.
But you'll see it
Um,
even like runners, like they hold that mile time.
mhm,
The marathoners, they're running sub fives for 26 miles.
mhm,
Like that, they're in pain
yeah.
for a long
Mhm.
time, right?
Yeah, I don't look at intensity as in, okay, there's intensity by definition. Highest intensity is a 1 rep max, which means low intensity be running a marathon.
Sure.
I look at psychological intensity a little different from physical intensity. And you have to be willing to go farther than anybody else in front of you to really kind of help ensure that you're going to make that goal. So it's just one of those things that you have to bring that intensity. But, the interesting part to me, and everybody has it somewhere. Unfortunately, most people have it as an actual dysfunction that actually creates a lot of problems in their life in other arenas. So we have a lot of people that have potentially some mental health issues they need to work on, or some other things that have affected them in life. And then this is the positive outlet that they can turn it into. Some people have positively addressed those demons and fixed those problems, and they know what that looks like, that level of intensity, so they can go there, without that. And then, and when I say maybe like some type of mental capacity they need to work on, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing or they're crazy or whatever.
Sure.
It can simply be that they've, maybe they were beaten as a child and they had to overcome, a thought process on like, about themselves or about their parents, or maybe they had to stick up for themselves one day, and that was a day of intensity they never expected in their life, but they had to give it their all to stay alive or stay healthy, right?
Right. The
And
fight
then
or
once that,
flight.
yep, and then once that intensity kicks in, you realize I can achieve great things with this intensity.
Right.
And if I want, and that changed my life. So if I want to change my life in this arena, I need to bring the same intensity. I love the intensity. I love that. I love that when someone can flip the switch and there's no other option. There's one option on the table, the only option they left on the table. And that's when people become dangerous in the sport, and when they don't leave a second option. And I'll kind of tell you two stories if you don't mind. Two things. One, I had a guy bring his kid in to see me, and he was a pitcher. He won. He was the winning pitcher for the last game for the Little League World Series in his age group. I think say he was 13, 14 at the time. And so obviously he's a good player,
He's good. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So good player, and his dad brings him in. It's like, okay, scouts, people are already paying attention to him. Like, he's going to be a pro baseball player. And, he tells me, he's like, he'll do anything you tell him to. He's like, tell him. He's like, yeah, I'll do anything you want me to do. Well, one, I shouldn't have to ask you after your dad said something to you. I'm not going to, I don't care what you
Right.
say. Like, I care about your actions. So I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out in a few seconds. So I just get him talking about different stuff. Like, what do you feel like you're good at, what you're not good at, you know, whatever. What's your favorite thing about baseball? This and that. Like, so like, like, what do you think about baseball? Do you like playing, or like, what do what's your like outlook? Like, is it fun for you? Do you feel like it's a job? Do you love it? He's like, it's all right. I'm like, never going to be a pro baseball player.
Right.
13 years old, done right then and there.
Yeah.
And people look at me like, well, you're harsh. I'm like, why am I harsh?
No.
It's just a fact. It's not about
Right.
being harsh. I didn't say he wasn't physically capable of going that route.
Sure.
I didn't say he didn't have the mental capacity to go that route. I'm simply saying, with how few people actually go into Major League Baseball, he doesn't seem to have the passion for it. Now, if his passion level changes, he's
Then
back on the
change.
cards,
Right.
But if it doesn't change, if you tell me someone's all right, like I never look at people like, hey, do you like lifting weights? And I go, it's all right. I've never said that in my life. I love
Right.
it. The only thing I'd be irritated about is if I have an injury or if I can't train the way I want to train. That's when I have a problem.
Yeah, me
Not,
too.
when I'm healthy and I can do whatever I want. I'm like, yeah, lifting's okay. Oh my God, right now there's nothing else I'd rather do than be able to lift, heavy weight and train every way I've ever wanted to do. That's all I want. So, I pay attention to what my clients are saying, and thinking things are okay is not really passionate enough,
Right.
But the other thing too is, you have the step. You first have to find someone who's willing to bring the intensity. Okay. But every athlete who's really an athlete already is. They already want to bring that intensity. They love it. There's something about them that craves that.
They're competitive people. They want to win. It could be playing cards. They don't care.
Yep. Correct. So the problem really comes down to you have to have that or you don't even have an athlete. So I look at if you don't have that, you're not an athlete. But if you have that, you're an athlete. Okay, you have potential now. Now, if we want to see if you can be the best in the world, now you got to show me the person who knows when to stop. Going's easy. We all want to go.
Right.
Like if Lucas was a boxer, MMA fighter, if he won every fight he was ever in and never got hurt, and someone goes, "Hey, you want to take another fight?" Hell yeah! Everybody gets to see me, win another fight. And I
I've
got
won everything, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Like that's easy. But the problem is you have to know also when to pull back. And in training, we train people not to miss weight. I think a great lifter should only miss upper body and lower body movement once every year to year and a half. Okay. I don't like people to miss weight. That also means I want you to hit a PR over 94, 95% of the time you're in the gym, which now makes a very fine line to keep your numbers moving up, but not miss weight. That's very important to me. So to give you an idea, one of my athletes, I was in their head about this for a long time, not missing weight. And this athlete finally showed me that they had, that part down. So this athlete was getting ready for a meet, world record holder in powerlifting, and hits a number on Circumax. And I'm like, okay, I don't want this athlete taking another attempt. Even the next attempt would be for a PR. And then whatever our Circumax is, if you hit a 20-pound PR, you hit a 20-pound PR in competition. It's always translated directly over. So it's one of those things in my mind. I'm like, if this athlete goes again, they will bomb out of their meet. If they call it right now, they'll break a world record. And so this athlete, one of our other teammates and partner says, "Oh man, you can go again. You can break your PR on this." And my athlete turned around and goes, "I have a choice. I can either break my PR right now and I can miss a world record, or I can just call it right now and break a world record. I'm going to do that."
That's
okay.
That's solid discipline, mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And then to trust the coach and the coach's call and be like, all right, that's fine. Because, once your ego is there and you're like, man, fuck that, I'm doing it. Right. It's tough because you want to shut that down. But, there's one contest it was a hybrid between Highland Games and Strongman, and the guys that were throwing were much better than me. But the guys that when it came to the lifting events, they couldn't do it. So I won the log press, and I still had 3 more attempts. And they're like, "You going again?" I'm like, "No, I won this event." And they're like, "Well, you can still do more." I go, "Yeah, but I have 4 more events today. See you later."
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get it, and I was like, "Yeah, you just shut it down because I still got more to go." It's like, "Hey, I did great in the first quarter of the game, but I got 3 more quarters." To your point, if you could hit a world record, that lasts until someone else breaks it.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be the target.
This athlete was sick. They had a cold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they were just worn out. And if you go for that max, now you're going to overload your nervous system and make it longer for you to recover. So do you need to pat yourself on the back and feel better that you can lift that weight? Or will you just rely on your training and know how much you've improved from last meet to this and rely on your abilities and execute to the best of your ability? That's all you have in you. At any given day, if Jim and I get, running each other and we get ticked off and we get into a fight, it doesn't matter if I'm sick or not. That's all I got. Right? And when you go to a competition, whatever you are physically capable of that day is all you have. The only thing that happens, you can't will anything to happen. What you can do is avoid making mistakes. Pick the right numbers, not the wrong ones. Don't get caught up, in the hype and, so-and-so just hit more on the bench than I thought, so I'm going to have to increase my opener on deadlift. Well, who cares about an opener? An opener means nothing. You win on your third.
Right.
You break world records on your second and third. I care less about an opener. If I'm worried about an opener, I'm not showing up to a meet, So opener should not be an issue whatsoever. Don't raise your opener. If you're going to raise something, raise a second or third attempt, you must
stay in the contest, get in the meet, hit your lift and keep going.
But, the problem, with it is that a lot of times people lack the mental strength by not making good decisions in a lot of aspects in life. When I say make good decisions, that's not only in the gym. If you make the wrong decisions, have the wrong partner, have the wrong girlfriend, boyfriend, You're going to have excess stress outside the gym you normally don't have. It's going to have things in your mind that's going to take from your focus or actually wear you out and spend more energy, and these are all negatives for your lifting. If you have to take that last lift on Circumax because you're not feeling good and you have to get a PR to know that you're going to get a PR on the meet, you're not there mentally. You got a game to work on, man. It's your mental game. Okay. But when you can sit there and go, I've done all the work by my accessory movements, my deadlifts, and all my other squat variations, I should have a 20, 25 pound PR on this meet. That's all I need to know. There's a roadmap. Good training shouldn't only build you physically, it should build you psychologically as well. Your training should be a roadmap to show you where you're going to improve upon, why you're improving, and how fast the rate of what you're improving is. And if you lay out training properly, you can read all those things from that, And then when you get those things and you put those things together, that should take the pressure off you as an athlete. If it doesn't, one, you either need to work on your mental game, or two, you need to look at the way you're laying out your programming or the program is laid out. Or maybe you have a coach who does know what they're doing and laying out properly, but you haven't learned enough about your sport to recognize what they've done for you. And so, whatever you do, you have to become a student in your sport. You have to dive as deep into it as possible. Even if you have a coach, doesn't mean you second guess them or take away from them, but it also is it's on you to study and ask questions and learn and surround yourself around the best people you can to evolve yourself. You can't just sit there and blame other people for your issues. So
Sure.
if you can't see why you've improved, there's something you need to work on. I look at what's available in a squat. Are your glutes stronger? Are your hips stronger? Your hamstrings? Or your quads? Or your midline stronger? If you can say yes, 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 then why are you worried about a PR? It's there.
It's coming. Yeah. We're just waiting for the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
All your confidence comes from all the reps. And so once you've done all the work, then the end result is basically a foregone conclusion at that point. All right. I got some quick questions here at the end. If you're training yourself, what do you listen to?
I like more like heavy metal or like gangster rap,
So
that's
DMX.
kind of more my thing. Yeah,
All right.
stuff like that.
If you could go on an adventure you haven't done yet, you're outside.
I have a lot of these. I actually believe that at least once a year you should try to scare the hell out of yourself.
Right.
Put yourself in uncomfortable positions and rely on yourself to get you out of those positions. Right now, what I'd say is I used to do endurance stuff. I haven't done endurance stuff in a long time. I have friends who do way cooler stuff than I do. So I think what I really want to do is find an area where the train's pretty hard. I was looking at a friend of mine's house out in Colorado. He's out on the Continental Divide area.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do I was thinking about doing 100 miles, but I want to do it nonstop. I want to complete the hike without stopping. And I'm not saying that's anything amazing or impressive. I just think for where I'm at right now and haven't done endurance stuff in a while, that would be a good, fun challenge to learn something about myself,
Sure.
But there's stuff I like to dive, do stuff and stuff like that. So I just every year I want something different. That's currently what I'm looking at.
Favorite sport movie?
It's funny because you sent me some things on this. I wrote some stuff down, and I'm like, God, I probably won't even remember half of it, to tell you the truth, because I like a lot of different things.
Sure.
I don't even know what I put down on that, to tell you the truth.
That's okay. What's in your head now then?
Man, it's the funny thing is, when I look at sports movies, there's a lot of things I really, there's actually movies that aren't necessarily about sports that I really like Unbreakable. You've seen that movie? And I know that's not what I put down. But Unbreakable I like because you can see why the guy was a good athlete, but you see that mental thought process play
That's my
out.
favorite. Yeah.
And he's had so many experiences along the way that built him mentally. You sit there and go, how many days was that guy? The guy competed in the Olympics, but how many days was he in a raft out in open water? Then he got beaten, and he was in a camp in POW, and people threatening his life, threatening to kill him and beating him all the time.
Yep.
And the funny thing is you have the soft individual who's beating the strong individual, and all you're doing is empowering them the whole time. And you can either cower away and you can want to disappear and you can want everything to be over, or you can lock in and realize they're beating you because they have no other choice, because they can't beat you and they have to try to beat you to bring them down to their level, right? And you can use that to empower them, because the more times they crack you and the more times you stand up, to that, the less chance they have of breaking you.
So that's a book, Unbroken. He's a World War II pilot that went down, right?
Yep.
And in a POW camp. Yeah, right. You wrote down Rush, which is a great movie on
Okay, cool.
Formula One cars. But favorite superhero?
This is gonna be hilarious. I really don't remember anything I put down. Oh, Wolverine for a male.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite book?
Favorite book? Book of Five Rings, because I read that book at least once a year every year. And I, yep,
So that's the one on right Musashi.
yep, correct.
Jocko talks about it's a book called Musashi,
Hmm.
right? And it's by E.G. Yoshikawa, and it's basically a romanticized fiction, but mostly nonfiction about the author of the Book of the Five Rings. So you might want to
Cool,
check that one out.
for
Favorite
sure.
supervillain?
Um, Man, I don't know who I said that one. This is horrible, isn't it? I
That's
was
all
like
right.
last night, like, yeah. Who did I put down? I'll tell you why.
Harley Quinn, probably because she's hot
Well,
and kind of messed up mentally,
she's fun.
right?
I'll say that.
Um, Advice for athletes. You wrote find coaches that have produced,
Hmm.
not that ones that are internet famous, but be patient and
Hmm.
dot your I's and cross your T's.
Yeah. So, ultimately, this is a very sticky and interesting situation, because social media is a great way to promote yourself, right? As a coach and as an athlete, as a coach, right? But you, as an athlete, if you knew everything that you needed to be an athlete, you wouldn't need a coach. So sometimes it's hard to decipher between who is good as a coach and who isn't good as a coach. So what I would say is look through who they've trained. How long have they been training that individual? What was that individual like before they got there? What were they like afterwards? Um, I had met a coach one time, and I was buying some equipment at a gym, and there's going out of business, and I knew the guy who was going out of business. And this guy came in, he was buying some equipment, and he introduced me. He's like, oh, he's a one of the strength coaches who works with um, Chad Johnson, football player. I was like, oh,
Right.
hey, nice to meet you. And he's like, I was like, oh, it's cool you train Chad or whatever, whatever. And he's like, yeah, he runs ripped off his 40 time. He's like, yeah, I'm a strength coach. He runs a whatever 40 time, and I can't remember what this 40 time was. And I go, and it just had like a cocky attitude, and I was kind of irritated about it. So I go, oh, that's cool. I go, so what was the time before I met you?
Right.
And he walked away.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
not a measurement of what your athlete does. It's a measurement of what have you done with that athlete and how much farther you get them to go and how much healthier
Sure.
they were. And did you help get their mental space in the best space it could be for overall quality of life? So look at what people have done, what they have done with that athlete since they've had them, how long have they been producing, what types of athletes have they dealt with. And you can even reach out to the athletes they've worked with and ask questions about them. You can talk to them and interview them. It's okay. Strength coaches, they're worth their weight, will take all the time in the world to talk to you and answer your questions. They want you to be comfortable with trusting them with what you do. They should be able to answer questions very easily. To me, a strength coach in a gym should be an educator. So a gym should be an educational facility. When I coach you, I don't just tell you what you're doing. I tell you why I'm doing it, because I want to gain your trust. And when I tell you why I'm doing it and give you a timeline on how fast you should see whatever improvement I see that you should have, and that timeline is correct every time, and what I say it's gonna do for you is always what it does, you start to build a trust with that athlete. But it's very important to look into who you're training. Just because someone's popular and they can show athletes or people in front of your face does not mean there's a good chance they might be better at marketing than they are actually as a strength coach, right?
Right.
If they have a great market, I don't want to knock anybody who has a good marketing team, has found the right people to help them. Um, but you'll be able to see their stuff. If you go long enough, you'll see that they've been working with people long enough and what they've done with people. So just pay attention. Just don't jump for what's flashy. Look into what you're doing. Dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Everybody wants something fast and immediate. If you're constantly seeing progression and constantly getting better, you know, details in the little things are huge. Okay. Don't left any stone unturned. All right. Anything that your coach is asking you to improve upon, don't half-ass anything. If you go a little easy on your midline work, that's going to be a problem down the road. If you don't execute every speed squat at the fastest of your ability through full range of motion, there is going to be another place that you're going to lack, output. And sometimes people look at their coaches and other people first. First, clear yourself. Make sure you are doing everything that you are supposed to be doing to the fullest extent of your ability, because only then can you assess the ability of the coach and the program that they're using for you and its success rate. If you are lacking yourself and output, then you can't make a correct assessment on your coach. And if you're expecting your coach to make up for your lack of work ethic, that's already a problem. You're already lost.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not a sustainable business model at all.
No, no.
All right, so last one. The purpose of today's training is to defeat yesterday's understanding.
So Musashi, I think it's a great quote, right?
Right?
Because as athletes, I always have, especially I'll run into like some younger lifters, and they'll talk about like, oh, I think people, people, I need to work on this, I need to work on that, and sometimes I don't think they're correct in that. I'm like, well, hey, why don't you try, and here's why. Yeah, but I really think I need to do this, and it's like, okay, well, you go do that, and then 2-3 years later, you run into an athlete, and like, man, for a year and a half, I did what I told you I was going to do. I didn't see any progress. And finally, I broke down and tried to decide, and man, like 3 months later, it was a game changer for me. What they knew is truth without being a student of their sport and lacking knowledge. You might think that you get better results than anybody's training. Maybe you are training in a gym and there's 4 other powerlifters and you're making gains faster than them. Doesn't mean you're on the correct path. It means that it's working for you right now. Maybe you're genetically more gifted than they are. Maybe you follow a good nutrition plan and they don't. Maybe you're in a different mental state than they are, right? There's a lot of different things. What we want to do is optimize your output. You're getting stronger. Does that mean that you're resilient to injury, or you're just getting stronger? Because if you have a really good, well laid out training protocol, you will also be injury resilient, right? So it's not just one thing. And when we're younger, we have a narrower scope of what we're looking at. As we get older, that scope starts to broaden out. So what we know is truth right now might not be the truth later down the road as we learn more.
That's right.
So I think people should be open-minded to what they're doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, man, Shane, thank you so much for your time, man.
Yep.
Really enjoyed it. Learned a lot of things. I'm going to need to follow back up with
Cool.
you again next
Sweet.
year and do this again. Always learning a lot. So very generous with your time. Thank you so much. Truly. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's great going on with you guys. Good talking to you, Jim. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you soon. I'll have to get to Indianapolis.